The gym had 200 people in it, and when the doors opened, every single one of them went silent. Not because of the game, not because of the score, because of who had just walked in and what was sitting in the trunk of the black car idling outside. Oliver Graham was 17 years old and had exactly one plan for his life, not a dream, a plan. The kind you build when the alternative is staying exactly where you are. A 2-bedroom apartment, a loading dock father, and a scholarship that doesn't exist yet. Basketball wasn't passion for Oliver, it was architecture. Every drill, every early morning, every hour in an empty gym, before the lights were even fully on, it was construction. Brick by brick, a life his mother never got to see him build. Then there was Dante Gallo, broad, loud, easy, the kind of confident that only comes from never having been told no. His father wasn't a businessman, not really. Rocco Gallo ran the kind of operations that don't appear on tax returns, and the kind of problems that Rocco couldn't buy his way out of, he made disappear another way. Dante had everything Oliver didn't, and he wanted the same thing. Coach Briggs gave them one Friday, one showdown 1st to 15, one spot. Nobody knew that by the time Oliver stood at that line, ball in his hands, score at 14 to 15, his father would be in the trunk of a car outside. Nobody knew that the most important decision of Oliver Graham's life wouldn't be about basketball at all. But to understand what happened in that gym, you have to understand who Oliver Graham was before he ever walked into it. And before we get into it, if this is your first time here, welcome. This channel is where stories live. Real ones, heavy ones. The kind that stay with you after the screen goes dark. Subscribe if that's what you're looking for. Now, let's go. The gym was empty at 5:47 in the morning. That was the point. Oliver liked it this way. Before the lights were fully warm, before the floor had been touched by anyone else, before the building remembered it was a school. In these 40 minutes, it was just his. The squeak of his sneakers, the rhythm of the dribble, the soft, decisive swish of a shot that found nothing but net. He wasn't practicing. He was building. That's the only word that ever made sense to him for what he did in that gym before the world woke up. Not training, not drills, building. Every made shot was a brick. Every early morning was a foundation layer. Somewhere above all of it, invisible, not yet real, was a life that looked nothing like the one he currently lived. 2-bedroom apartment on the west side. A father who came home smelling like diesel and tiredness and kept every single promise he ever made anyway. A mother who existed now only in a photograph on the refrigerator and in the specific way Oliver tilted his head when he was thinking hard. Basketball was not Oliver Graham's dream. It was his blueprint. He shot until his arms remembered the motion without asking his brain. Then he shot again. The doors opened at 8:15. Oliver heard him before he saw him. The easy, carrying laugh of someone who had never needed to lower his voice to be taken seriously. Dante Gallo walked into that gymnasium the way people walk into rooms they already own. Broad through the shoulders, relaxed in the jaw. Behind him, a personal trainer with a clipboard, a bag that probably cost more than Oliver's monthly groceries, and 2 other boys who seemed to exist purely as atmosphere. Oliver didn't stop shooting. Dante noticed. He watched for a moment, quiet, assessing, and then something moved across his face that wasn't quite respect and wasn't quite dismissal. Something more careful than either. "You Oliver?" he asked. "Yeah, Dante." He didn't extend a hand, neither did Oliver. They looked at each other the way 2 people look at each other when they're trying to measure something they can't quite name. Then Coach Briggs blew his whistle from the doorway. "Save it," he said. "I've got 2 boys in one spot, figure it out." That was the whole speech. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of side-by-side practice, and neither of them pulled ahead. Not by enough. Not by anything Coach Briggs could point to and call decisive. Oliver was fluid. He read the floor like a language he'd been born speaking. Gaps appearing in his vision before they existed in reality. His body already moving through space that hadn't opened yet. His game was instinct sharpened into something close to precision. Hunger dressed up as skill. Dante was power. He used his size without apology, creating space through sheer physical authority. His footwork was textbook. The product of coaching that cost real money, and when he rose for a shot, there was a particular kind of correctness to it. Technically flawless, structurally sound. The difference, the thing Oliver noticed and tucked quietly away, was that Dante's game lived on him. Like clothing, like something he could take off at the end of the day. Oliver's game lived in him, but that wasn't something you could show a coach in 3 weeks. It was a Tuesday afternoon when it happened. Practice had run long. The other players had filtered out, and Oliver and Dante were the last two in the gym, both of them against the wall, water bottles in hand, breathing hard. Neither spoke. The silence wasn't hostile, it was just honest. Dante took a long drink, stared at the far basket. Oliver did the same. For 40 seconds, maybe less, they were just two 17-year-olds tired from the same thing. Not rivals, not opponents. Just two boys sitting with the weight of wanting something badly and not knowing yet if wanting was enough. Neither of them acknowledged it. Neither needed to. Wednesday morning, Coach Briggs called them both to the center of the floor. He didn't sit them down, didn't give a speech. He stood with his arms crossed and looked at both of them like a man who has made a decision and is comfortable with it. Friday, he said, one-on-one, half court, 1st to 15, a pause, the deliberate kind. Winner starts opening night. He walked away. Oliver stood on that court and felt the weight of Friday settle into his chest like something solid and permanent. He breathed in slowly, out slowly. Friday. He didn't know yet what Friday would cost. None of them did. Dante made the call at 9:47 that night. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, shoes still on, lights still up, staring at nothing in particular. The house around him was large and quiet in the way expensive houses are quiet. Not peaceful, just empty of the right sounds. He didn't deliberate. That's the thing about Dante Gallo that nobody who watched him play would ever see. On the court, he was decisive, physical, present. Off it, when something felt uncertain, there was only ever one move, one number, one voice that made the uncertainty go away. He called his father. "I need this one," he said. Just that. Rocco Gallo didn't ask questions. He didn't ask what this one meant, or why, or what it would cost, or whether his son had tried everything else first. Those weren't the kinds of conversations they had. "Okay," Rocco said. The call lasted under a minute. Dante set his phone down, lay back on his bed, stared at the ceiling with the particular ease of someone who has just handed a heavy thing to someone else and doesn't intend to think about how it gets carried. He never asked how. He never had. Across the city, on a street that didn't have a name worth remembering, the light above the kitchen table at the Graham apartment cast everything in the kind of warm yellow that makes small spaces feel intentional rather than small. Oliver sat across from his father. Rice and beans, 2 plates. Simple and sufficient, the way most things were in that apartment. Joshua Graham smelled like diesel and the particular exhaustion of a man who works with his body for a living, and he had the hands to show for it. Rough, capable. Hands that had never done anything easy but had also never failed to do what was necessary. They ate for a while without speaking. That was its own language between them. Comfortable silence. The kind you can only build over years of showing up for each other without making it a performance. Joshua spoke first. "You nervous?" Oliver kept his eyes on his plate. "No," then quieter. "Yeah," Joshua nodded slowly, set his fork down. "Good," he said. "Nerves mean you care." He looked at his son, not with urgency, not with pressure, but with the steady certainty of a man who has thought about this before and arrived at a conclusion he trusts. "Play your game, not his, yours." Oliver looked up. There was more he wanted to say. Questions that didn't have clean shapes yet. Fears that hadn't fully formed into words. But his father was already picking his fork back up, and somehow that, the simplicity of it, the lack of ceremony, said everything the words couldn't. You already have what you need. Now eat. Oliver didn't sleep. He lay in the dark with his hands behind his head and the ceiling above him, holding still while everything inside him moved. Friday was 36 hours away. 1st to 15, one spot. One shot at the thing he had been building toward since before he knew what building was. He breathed. He stared. Somewhere around 2 a.m. He stopped trying to sleep and just let himself be awake. Let the weight sit on his chest without fighting it. His mother's face came to him the way it sometimes did in the dark. Not sad, exactly. Just present. Watching. Play your game. He closed his eyes and waited for morning. Rocco Gallo did not lose sleep over anything. He made his preparations the way he made all preparations. Unhurried, methodical, without visible emotion. 2 phone calls. 2 men he trusted for their silence more than their conversation. A route mapped. A window of time identified. Joshua Graham left the loading dock at 11:20 p.m. Same route he always took, same streets. Same darkness between the same two streetlights, where the city's attention thinned to almost nothing. The black car was already there. It didn't take long. It never did, with Rocco. Oliver's alarm went off at 5:45 Thursday morning. He reached for his phone and checked for a message from his father. Joshua always sent one after a night shift. 3 words, always the same. Home safe. Sleep. The message wasn't there. Oliver stared at the screen for a moment, set the phone down, told himself Joshua had probably just forgotten, fallen straight into bed without thinking. It happened sometimes. He got up, laced his shoes, headed for the gym. He didn't know yet. He wouldn't know until Friday, when he looked through a parking lot window and understood, all at once, exactly what his father's absence had meant. Friday came in gray, no sun, no ceremony. Just a flat, heavy sky that sat over the city like it was waiting for something, and a gymnasium that had run out of seats by 7:45 in the morning. Word had spread, not about the game exactly, about who was connected to it. Dante Gallo's last name had moved through the school the way dangerous things move, quietly, quickly, and always a little ahead of the people carrying it. Nobody said Rocco Gallo's name above a murmur, but everyone knew it, and everyone came. They filled the bleachers first, then the standing spaces, then the walls. 200 people in a gym built for 150, all of them carrying the particular energy of a crowd that isn't sure what it's about to witness, but suspects it won't be ordinary. Oliver arrived alone. He stood at the entrance for one moment, just one, looked at all of it, and then walked to the center of the floor like he had been there 1,000 times. Because he had. Coach Briggs blew the whistle at 8 exactly. No speech, no setup. He threw the ball to the center of the court and stepped back. The game began. It was everything. That's the only way to say it. Every basket traded like an argument neither boy was willing to lose. Oliver moved the way water moves, finding gaps that shouldn't exist, slipping through contact, changing direction at angles that seemed to rewrite the rules of how a body is supposed to work. Dante answered with weight, with power. He created his own space through sheer insistence, rising over Oliver with the kind of elevation that comes from years of specific, expensive training. 4-4, the crowd found its rhythm. 8-7, Oliver, neither boy performed. That was what made it remarkable. There was no showboating, no crowd work, no stolen glances at the bleachers. They were locked into each other. 2 boys fighting for the same thing with completely different tools. And the gym could feel the difference between this and a game. This was something else. 11-11, the crowd noise shifted. Less celebration, more tension. People leaned forward without realizing they were doing it. 13-12, Dante. Oliver brought it back. One smooth pull-up from the mid-range, the kind of shot that looks effortless only because of how many thousands of times it has been practiced in an empty gym before 6 a.m. 13-13 and 14-13, Oliver. Then Dante, jaw tight, eyes focused, absolutely refusing, came right back. 14-14. The gym held its breath. Both boys stood at opposite ends of the half court, breathing hard, glistening under the fluorescent light. 14 points each and everything still perfectly, agonizingly undecided. Oliver bounced the ball once, studied Dante's feet. Dante received the pass at the elbow. His trainer had drilled this spot into him 1,000 times. This was his ground. He knew it. He pump faked. Oliver didn't bite. He pump faked again. Slower this time, more convincing, and Oliver's weight shifted. Just slightly, just enough. Dante rose. The shot left his hand clean. It arched high and certain and fell through the net without argument. Dante, 15, Oliver, 14. The crowd exhaled. Not celebration, just release, like a room that had been holding pressure finally finding a crack. Oliver caught the ball at the three-point line. One shot. Score and he leads. Miss and they go to overtime. He bounced it once, twice, and then the doors opened. Not quickly. Not with urgency. They opened the way doors open when the person on the other side has never needed to hurry because the world has always waited for them. 2 large men entered first. They moved along the walls, eyes scanning, bodies positioned. The way men move when their job is to make sure a room is safe before someone important steps into it. Then Rocco Gallo walked through, charcoal coat, both hands in his pockets, moving at the pace of absolute certainty. He didn't look at Dante. He didn't look at Coach Briggs. He didn't look at the crowd that was going silent around him in waves. Quiet spreading outward from his entrance like a sound dying from its source. He looked at Oliver. Oliver felt it before he understood it. A shift, a temperature change. Something in the room that had not been there 1 second ago and was now permanently, irreversibly present. His eyes moved, instinctively, without instruction, to the side exit window, the parking lot. A black car, engine running, the trunk, not fully closed. Oliver's stomach dropped through the floor. He looked back at Rocco Gallo. Rocco looked back with the patience of a man who has never once in his life been told no. And Oliver understood. His hands tightened around the ball until his knuckles ached. "Miss it," said everything reasonable inside him. "Miss it. Walk away. Go home. Your father comes back and you figure out another way and you live." He stood at the line, ball in his hands. 200 people around him, and the loudest sound in the building was his own breathing. Nobody moved. That's what was remarkable about it. 200 people, packed into bleachers, pressed against walls, standing 3 deep at every exit, and not one of them made a sound. Not one of them shifted their weight, or cleared their throat, or whispered to the person beside them. The gym was frozen. Rocco Gallo stood at the entrance with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on Oliver Graham, and the silence around him was the kind of silence that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because a room full of people has collectively understood that something is occurring that is larger than they have words for. Oliver stood at the 3-point line, ball in his hands, breathing. Dante hadn't moved either. He was still standing where the celebration should have been. 15 points. Game point. The moment he had been working toward for 3 weeks, and he wasn't celebrating. He was staring at the floor, jaw tight. Something moving through his face that he didn't have a name for yet. He hadn't known. That matters. He had made one phone call and handed the problem to his father, and never asked how it would be handled. But he hadn't known it would look like this. He hadn't pictured a parking lot, a trunk, a man's father. Something shifted in Dante Gallo's face in that frozen gymnasium. It would take him years to fully identify what it was. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now. Would you have taken the shot? Just yes or no. I want to see where everyone lands before this plays out. Oliver's eyes moved back to the window. The gap in the trunk had widened, slightly, barely, just enough. And there, in the thin slice of parking lot light and shadow, was his father's face. Joshua Graham looked tired. Of course he did. He had been in that trunk since the night before, and he was a man who worked a loading dock for a living and hadn't slept. His face carried all of that. The fear too. Oliver could see it, and seeing it cost him something he would never fully get back. But his father's eyes were clear. That was the thing. Underneath the exhaustion and the fear and everything that trunk had taken from him, Joshua Graham's eyes were absolutely, completely clear. His jaw was set. His gaze was direct. He found his son's face through that window, across a parking lot and a gymnasium wall, and he nodded, once, slow, deliberate, unmistakable. Do it. Oliver felt it move through him like a current. Not permission, not instruction. Something deeper than either. He understood. In the way you understand things that arrive all at once rather than building gradually. Exactly what his father was saying. Not I don't matter. Not my life is worth less than this shot, but something far more precise, far more devastating. I built you for this moment. Every early morning, every rice and beans dinner. Every night I came home when I was too tired to stand. I came home because I was building something. I was building you, and you are standing exactly where I always knew you would stand. Don't you dare waste it. Oliver turned back to the basket. He breathed once, just once. And then his body did what 10,000 mornings in an empty gym had prepared it to do. Stopped thinking entirely and started remembering. The shot left his hands clean and certain. It rose in a perfect arc. The kind of arc that has no doubt in it. The kind that only happens when the mind goes quiet and the body finally gets to speak. It kissed the glass. It fell through the net. Oliver, 16, Dante 15, the gym erupted. Sound crashed back into the building all at once. Voices and movement and sneakers on hardwood and Coach Briggs' whistle lost somewhere inside all of it. Teammates rushed the floor. The bleachers came alive. Oliver didn't move. He stood at the 3-point line with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the window. The black car was already moving, slow, unhurried. pulling out of the lot the same way Rocco Gallo had walked into the gym, like a man who has never once needed to run from anything. Oliver watched it until it disappeared. Tell me something, and be honest in the comments. When you saw that nod, whose courage hit harder? The son who took the shot, or the father who told him to? The noise began to settle around him in layers. And through it, across the court, through the celebrating bodies and the chaos, Dante Gallo looked up. He found Oliver's eyes. Neither of them spoke. Neither moved toward the other. They just looked. Two 17-year-olds standing inside the wreckage of something that had started as a basketball game and had become something neither of them had vocabulary for yet. It wasn't rivalry anymore. It was heavier than that, older than that. It was the specific, wordless recognition of two people who have both just witnessed something true and who understand, without saying it, that they will carry it in different ways for the rest of their lives. The locker room was loud. Of course it was. Teammates came through the door in waves. Voices overlapping, someone's music bleeding from a phone speaker, hands reaching for Oliver's shoulder, his back, the top of his head. Congratulations arriving from every direction at once. Oliver sat on the bench, still in his game clothes, elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped between them. He had won. He knew that. The scoreboard had said so. Coach Briggs had said so. 15 different voices were still saying so, filling the room with the warm, uncomplicated noise of people who had witnessed something good and were happy about it. But the wind sat in Oliver's chest like a stone, cold, heavy, complicated in ways he didn't have language for yet, because he had made the most important decision of his life with his father's safety as the cost. And his father had told him to. And that truth was simultaneously the most comforting and the most terrifying thing he had ever been asked to hold. He nodded at the right moments, said the right words, and waited for the room to empty. The black car moved through the city in silence. Rocco drove. Joshua sat in the back, unharmed, still, watching the streetlights pass through the window one by one. The cities looked the same as it always did at this hour. Indifferent, continuous. Unbothered by what had just occurred inside one gymnasium on one ordinary Friday. Rocco didn't speak for several blocks. When he did, he didn't look in the mirror. He kept his eyes on the road the same way he did everything. Direct, without performance. Your boy didn't flinch. Joshua said nothing. A beat passed. I've seen grown men fold under less. Rocco's voice carried no particular emotion. It was the voice of a man making an honest observation, giving credit where he had not expected to give it. Grown men who knew what was at stake and still couldn't do it. The car slowed. Rocco pulled the curb on a quiet street, the kind of street where the light is thin and nobody is watching, and reached into his coat. He held Joshua's wallet over the back of the seat without turning around. Joshua took it. Tell your son to be careful out there. A pause, still not looking. That's not a threat. Another pause, shorter, more deliberate. That's respect. The door unlocked. Joshua stepped out into the October cold and stood on the pavement while the black car pulled away and disappeared into the city's indifferent dark. He walked home. It took 40 minutes. He didn't rush. He needed the cold. He needed the distance between that curb and his front door to be filled with something. With walking, with breathing, with the particular October air that smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. He needed time to move through what the last 18 hours had done to him. Fear. He had been genuinely afraid. He would not pretend otherwise. But underneath the fear, deeper than it, more permanent than it, was something vast and wordless that he recognized as pride. Not the simple kind, not the kind you feel at a school play or a report card. The specific, staggering pride of a father who had spent 17 years building something, quietly, without fanfare, through diesel-stained hands and rice and beans, and never once failing to come home, and had just watched that something stand at a three-point line with everything on the line, and not flinch. Joshua Graham walked home through the October cold and let himself feel all of it. The apartment light was on. He came through the door, and Oliver was at the kitchen table, still in his game clothes, food in front of him untouched. He looked up when his father entered, and something moved across his face that wasn't relief exactly. It was bigger than relief, more broken open than that. Joshua sat down across from him. No speech. No announcement. He reached into his coat and set his wallet on the table between them. Gently, deliberately, and left his hands flat on either side of it. Oliver stared at it, then at his father's hands. No marks, no bandages, just the usual wear. The usual diesel-stained evidence of a life lived through hard and honest work. The silence between them was long and full. "He said you've got some real balls, kid." Joshua's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Oliver looked up. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing something he was trying not to let them do. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Just that." Joshua looked at his son. Really looked. The way fathers look when they suddenly see not the child they have been raising, but the person that child has become. Proud, mournful, certain. "I'm fin," he said. "You played your game." Oliver nodded, looked down. And somewhere between one breath and the next, quietly, without announcement, he finally let himself feel it. Not the win, not the shot, not the score, or the crowd, or the scholarship that would follow. His father, sitting across from him, alive, present, smelling like diesel and October cold, and every single promise he had ever kept. Oliver closed his eyes and exhaled. Across the city, in a house with too many rooms and not enough noise, Dante Gallo sat alone on the edge of his bed. Shoes still on, lights still up, his phone in his hand, his father's name on the screen. He sat with it for a long time, longer than he had ever sat with anything. The silence in that big, expensive house pressed against him in a way it never had before. And for the first time in his life, he noticed what was missing from it. His thumb hovered, then he set the phone face down on the mattress. And for the first time in his life, Dante Gallo didn't call. And that's where we leave them. Oliver Graham, a boy who chose right over safe and got his father back anyway. Joshua Graham, a man who loved his son the only way he knew how, by refusing to let him shrink. Rocco Gallo, a dangerous man who respected one thing above everything else: people who don't break.
And Dante,
sitting in the quiet, beginning, maybe for the first time, to ask what kind of man he actually wants to become. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. A son, a father, someone who is standing at their own three-point line right now, trying to decide whether to take the shot. And subscribe if you want more stories like this one. This is what we do here. See you in the next one.